This morning's show is about Down syndrome, but our guest is uplifting. You'll meet her coming up next on Carolina People. Good morning. Welcome to Carolina People. This morning we're at Keller Williams Realty, Myrtle Beach Central, home of Team Whiteman. We're focused on the Strand Down Syndrome Society, and we're visiting with its secretary, Tammy Harrell. Good morning, Tammy.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming in
Thank
early
you
on a
for
Wednesday
having me.
morning.
Thank you for having
A
me.
lot going on with the Strand Down Syndrome Society. Just a little older than a year now.
Right.
Right about a year.
That's right. We're a new organization that just formed in the Grand Strand. We originally kind of spun off from Charleston, Low Country Down Syndrome Society, and there was such a great need in this area, so here we are.
There really is a great need in the Horry, Georgetown County area?
Absolutely. The closest society was in Charleston, and of course that's, depending on what part of the county you're in, it's a long ride for the support and the activities. So we felt the need, and our group was formed.
How prevalent is Down syndrome in births? Is that a pretty regular occurrence, even using national statistics or otherwise?
Right now, 1 in every 800 to 1,000 babies born in the United States will have Down syndrome.
Is that right?
80% of the babies born in the United States are born to mothers under the age of 35. And of course, that is because more women are having babies under the age of 35. So it's fairly common. I think it's more common than people realize.
Yeah. And for viewers who may not have a familiarity with Down syndrome, what exactly is it?
Down syndrome, also known as trisomy 21, is when a child genetically, the 21st chromosome actually has 3 instead of 2. So the baby's actually born with an extra chromosome, and that's on the 21st, hence the name trisomy 21.
Okay.
Some of the things affiliated with that at times tends to be the little bit slanting of the eyes. About 30% of the children born with Down syndrome have heart defects. 8 to 12% have gastrointestinal problems. There could be a higher incidence of leukemia, issues like that.
But there's no way to, you said that the eyes would be one, I mean, there's no way to know that a child has Down syndrome looking at them except for possibly that eye issue?
Some genetic, physical features. A little bit of, like I said, a slant of the eyes tend to be a little further spread apart. Noses tend to be, the bridge in the nose tends to be a little flatter. Arms tend to be a little shorter. They tend to be a little smaller. At birth, the back of the head tends to be a little flatter, and there's a little bit of, I want to say extra skin at the nape of the neck. An extra fold sometimes tends to be there. Sometimes the crease in the hand, there tends to be one crease instead of where we have several. Various different, physical features. Basically, facial features tends to be the...
What causes a child or parents or a mother to birth a child with Down syndrome? Is there any known cause? Is this...
There is no known cause. They don't know why it happens. It doesn't... it's not a parent's fault. There's nothing they can do to avoid it. It just happens. It's just nature, and it happens.
And is the Strand Down Syndrome Society trying to raise funds to help find a cure, or is it principally to help support parents that have children born with Down syndrome?
Our organization is looking to just provide awareness, support to other families, awareness to the medical community, and just helping other families know that they're not alone, that we're out there, and we're one happy family, and we just want to provide support for each other.
Great, good. Now, have you been personally impacted by Down syndrome? I
have. My husband and I, Jimmy, we have 4 children, are ranging from 12 years old, who's Cody, Gabrielle is 4, Aiden is also 4, and Avery Grace is our daughter who has Down syndrome. She's 14 months old, and she is our last child. So
and she's your last child?
She is, yes.
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 Made a conscious decision. So,
yes.
And you said your 4th child,
yes.
who's 1.
Yes. And I was one of the older moms, maternal age. I was 40 when I had Avery.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really know if that played a part, but they think it probably did. Maternal age tends, they found that in children also with Down syndrome, a lot of times maternal age does play a part.
Mm-hmm. How was that? When did you first find out that Avery Grace, had you all determined her name and everything prior to finding that out, or
no, we actually didn't. We didn't develop her name until later on. But we found out at 20 weeks. I had amniocentesis, and I've had amnio with all my other children as
right,
well.
Sure.
So we knew what the outcome possibly could be. But I did have the amniocentesis, and it was 20 weeks. We got a call from my OB/GYN on the phone, and she broke the news to us on the telephone, and I had to meet with her the next day and discuss options, what some of my options were.
What are there options that are oftentimes put in front of parents? Are there common options? Are there, without getting directly into detail with that experience with your OB/GYN?
I found that for me, there wasn't a lot of information. It tended, unfortunately, to go to termination.
To terminate the pregnancy?
Yeah, and that tends to be, at this point, I think, the way people, the only option people feel that they have. 95% of the births in South Carolina are terminated. Very small percent, 5%, go on to carry.
You say 95% of the births that a parent knows, or the parents know ahead of time, that find out that their child will be born with Down syndrome.
Parents who find out in utero that the child has Down syndrome, 95% terminate. 5% go on to carry on the pregnancy. So we knew at 20 weeks that our daughter, we knew it was a girl, and our daughter had Down syndrome.
Why do you think that rate is so high, Tammy? That's an alarmingly high rate. You said 95%.
95%. I think people aren't given the options. I think that it's presented, a lot of the information that's out there is very old. There's a lot of doom and gloom. This child will never develop, will never be able to keep up. The child will never be able to walk. There's a lot of myths. There's a lot of improper knowledge nowadays. And I think a lot of times in the medical community, that's what's available. And I think that moms-to-be get that kind of information. It's scary. I mean, it's terrifying, the fear of the unknown, and not giving other options or giving accurate, clear information scares a lot of people.
Well, another reason why viewers need to take the time to learn more about Down syndrome, as well as does the Grand Strand Down Syndrome Society have a website or a phone number that a viewer could call to learn more?
We do. Our website is www.gsdss.net.
Okay.
If parents or to-be parents or anybody wants more information, they can also contact us by phone. It's 843-267-2581.
Okay, 267-2581 and gsdss.net.
Correct.
That's very important. Of course, I'm sure the website's got links to other national places that there'd be a vehicle to learn more, or y'all probably have some detailed information.
Absolutely.
Or even a little bit of information on there, just anything. Now, do parents oftentimes find that they, I guess it's difficult to think through that aspect of when you make a determination to carry the child to term, do parents ever look into possibly, or is adoption ever a method? Or is that ever a viable option is there a need?
Absolutely. There is a very, very long waiting list for parents who want to adopt Down's children, a waiting list that goes on for years. And many parents will never get a Down's child because of the waiting list. The demand to adopt a Down's baby is just incredible. And I think mothers also don't know that when they realize they're pregnant, and that there are other options, that, adoption is certainly a very strong alternative.
You had shared that before we began the interview, so I wanted to make sure there was an opportunity to get that out, because that is a critical thing. When you talk about that simple aspect, those powerful numbers that 95% of parents that find out their child will be born with the Down syndrome actually go into termination mode and terminate the pregnancy. And I guess they're finding out at levels as early as 20 weeks, or even oftentimes earlier than that.
They're usually finding out, I believe it's 16 to 20 weeks. So there's a very small window of time to make that decision.
So during the second trimester, they're oftentimes finding that out, and knowing that there is such a waiting list for parents who would love the opportunity to adopt a child with Down syndrome. would possibly open the door to more parents
Absolutely.
thinking seriously about carrying the child to term and
Absolutely.
providing that alternative for parents that may or may not have the ability to have a child. That's critical.
Absolutely.
That's critical. You know, when you think about some of those early steps for you and Jimmy, had you all faced some issues with tough pregnancies earlier on?
We did. My first 2 pregnancies were fine. My son Cody and Gabrielle were full term, big babies. We had our son Aiden very soon after we had Gabrielle, and Aiden was a preemie. He was born 5 weeks early, so we experienced the NIC unit, intensive care for babies at at McLeod.
At McLeod.
And we went through a really tough time. And then we got pregnant with Avery about 2 years later. So there was somewhat of a fear there anyway. I was concerned about having another preemie. I had some medical problems myself that were going to be very important in my delivery and in my care through the pregnancy.
So 5 weeks early, you know, earlier this week on Monday, the day after Easter, we had Brian Simpson, whose son was born about 11 weeks early. And to hear, as we listened to those experiences that he and his wife went through, waiting almost 2 weeks before they could hold their son for the first time. I guess with a child born 5 weeks early, you probably didn't have to wait that long. It was a
week. I believe it was about a week.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Still a week, though.
Still a week. Went through a lot of the same things, the incubator, the tubes, having to hold the baby against your skin. It was quite an experience. Going through that was much more difficult than dealing with a child with Down syndrome.
Is that right? That's part of what I wanted to get
Absolutely.
to. If those were some of the issues that you faced in birthing Avery Grace. Was she born full term?
She was born 4 weeks early, but it
Okay.
was considered full term. She was born with an emergency C-section.
Okay.
She was completely healthy and beautiful. We have no medical problems whatsoever, no heart problems. Eyesight's perfect, hearing is perfect at this point, so we're very blessed. She's a healthy, beautiful little girl.
And what would distinguish her, if you don't mind me asking, how, with all of that being as healthy and sounding as virtually perfect as
Absolutely.
how would she be distinguished between another child? What are some of the distinguishing features, if you don't mind sharing with viewers?
For Avery,
Right.
her eyes, for me, I think she's perfect, but
Right.
the slant of her eyes, her nose tends to be a little broader at the bridge. She tends to, their muscle tone sometimes in their mouths is weak. So sometimes they have a tendency for the tongue to stick out a little bit. Hers is a little stronger than I've seen on some other children, but for Avery Grace, it would basically be her eyes, the slant of her eyes and the width of her eyes.
And will there be developmental issues as it relates to learning for Avery Grace, stuff that you all will face in the future that you've, I guess, in studying Down syndrome now and having a better interaction with a lot of the other families and parents involved in the Grand Strand Down Syndrome Society, is there some anecdotal discussion about what some of the issues that you may face with Avery Grace going forward?
Most of every child's an individual. They all have different, like any normal child,
Sure.
they all develop differently. Avery Grace tends to, she's not walking maybe as soon as my other children. She didn't move and roll over quite as soon as my other children. We don't really know yet. It's a little too soon to tell. She does receive physical therapy and occupational therapy, and both her physical therapist and occupational therapist have been wonderful and really have made a difference developmentally for her. But as far as her development in school, her learning, it's still too soon to tell. It could be very mild, or it could be a little bit more moderate.